Hey guys, I know that you're here for the podcast episode. Thank you so much for your support. Real quick, I wanted to tell you about my business. That's STSG Marketing. When it comes to social media, it's a must for your business. If you're not doing it, you're missing out on tons of new clients and a way to engage with your old ones. So it's just super important. That's what I do. I can create content for you. I can manage your social media for you. I can coach you on how to grow your business through social media organically. If that's something you want a hand with, I would love to help you. Cruise over to my website. That's stsgmarketing.com. I would love to help you. Now let's get into the episode. Hey guys, Skyler Rader here, STSG. Thank you again for letting me be a part of your day. Today I am joined by fellow health insurance agent, Kristen Gines. I knew I was going to do that, Kristen. You're going to come on the stage in a minute. Knew it was going to mess it up. She's going to help me navigate the health insurance world and teach me all about how to sell it.
Sky, the service guy, staying up late at night, doing podcasts all the time, talking about service, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got the sales, we got the knowledge to make a bill. We just paying bills, all we know is time will tell. Sky, the service guy.
It wouldn't be an organic intro if I didn't at least fall on my face once in a while. This is Kristen Gines. Thank you so much. Gines, see, I knew it. We even went over it before I started recording. So
That's all right. That's all right.
Thank you for making time in my day, in your day to do this with me, even though I'm going to butcher your name 100 more times now that I'm trying not to.
That's all right.
You know?
Like I said, I'm used to it. If it's similar enough, I just respond to it at this point.
Right. Well, today we're joined by Kristen. She is a health insurance agent. She's had quite a journey into becoming an agent. We're going to learn all about that. Today's main three points of emphasis are very simple. We're going to start at the beginning with her, get a little bit of her background. The big part I want her to share with us is the education piece. There's so much going on in the health insurance world. Even somebody like me who's licensed, it's still like reading Egyptian. And then finally, I want to hear from her on how she juggles her business with being a parent and life in general. I think as entrepreneurs, sometimes time management is so difficult for us. So I'm excited to get into all three. So Kristen, why don't you start at the beginning? How did you become a health insurance agent?
Yeah, like you said, it's kind of a bit of a convoluted story. My background is actually in microbiology. So very different from what I'm doing now. That was what my degree was in. That was what I was always passionate about. My senior research was in stem cells, and I thought my course of life was going to go down, the research, development, maybe even physician sort of field.
Right.
As I progressed, it's just not kind of where it went and what I was driven to anymore. And then, as I became a parent and as things moved, I realized that I needed something that was a little bit more flexible for one,
Sure.
But also I was getting really sick of answering to people who didn't have the same knowledge as I did, who expected biology to work the way a business does and not the way that bacteria and things like that actually work.
Sure.
So that was just getting so frustrating for me to have to try to explain over and over and over again that no matter what your bottom line is, the bacteria don't care. And so, like I said, when I became a parent, I was just like, I need something that's a little bit less chaotic and something that I can do a little bit more on my own terms. And so that's kind of what drove me towards looking into certifications. And I happened to find an agent that I really clicked with that worked in the health insurance field, and he helped me get started. And that's sort of how I ended up here.
Let me ask you, with being so invested in school and education and your degree, how did your friends or family react to you talking about the idea of switching careers?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I know that there were they didn't really say it to me point blank because
Sure.
I think they're pretty used to me just kind of doing what I need to do. And my husband's always been very supportive of that. He's never questioned what I'm doing or what my plans are. He's just, there 100% of the time. His parents definitely had some thoughts about it. My parents did too, but they've always been very supportive. And so I think they were a little confused at first because like I said, it's very different from what I was doing. But I think as they've seen the changes that I've been able to have in my life, it's been a little bit easier for them to accept.
Sure. The proof's in the pudding, right?
Right.
So was there any expectations you had on yourself from all that time you spent on your education to what you're doing now?
Mm-hmm. For sure. And it definitely was a little bit of a slower build than I would have liked because I'm very much an overachiever. And I knew I was going to be a working parent. That was always something that was in the cards for me. And so there was a lot of that pressure with starting out on my own business and, not having a guaranteed paycheck. That put a lot of pressure on me and on myself specifically, and mostly from me. And thankfully, I had the forethought and the resources to hire a business coach who was able to help me work through some of that and managing expectations so that, as these hurdles came up, it was a little bit easier to manage and get over and not get burnt out and quit right away.
I was actually going to ask you if you had any help here at the beginning getting started. How did you settle on that one coach?
So it's a funny story because I followed her on Instagram before I realized that we were actually neighbors.
Oh, wow.
So I knew she was from my area. And I found her, I think via TikTok or Instagram on Reels at one point. And she specifically works with people with ADHD, which I found out I had a few years ago. And then slowly realized oh, you live 2 blocks away from me and I've been following you all this time. And so it was a really natural fit and, made it a little bit easier in that selection process of finding somebody that was going to click with me rather than just pointing and clicking on Google for a business coach.
Sure. Yeah. Anytime you go to Google, you got to be careful what you put your info into. Next thing you know, you'll be a lead for 100 people to call you. Exactly.
Yeah. So I was glad to have that kind of readily available and pare down some of those options.
So on your journey here to becoming an agent, what was, I took the test, I could tell you don't not to put myself down, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to pass the test. No. It is a lot of information, but just like anything, you can memorize it. Mm-hmm. Besides the education piece, was there a hurdle you had from going from, I'm assuming, academia where we're more in the books, we're more maybe, under the microscope to communicating with people more. Was there any hurdles for you?
Yes, absolutely. I am much more naturally an introvert. And so a lot of the reason that I chose the field that I did was because one, I was passionate about it. But also it was one that sort of limited the amount that I did have to interact with people.
I love it.
And the thing is, I realized pretty early on that I have a knack and an ability to connect with people and to work with them. It just makes me tired. Sure. So I was well, it is a talent that I think I have, that people have told me about that I have. And for me, when I see an opportunity come up, I feel like I should take it. I don't feel like those are just coincidence. And so with the opportunity coming, I was well, maybe this is a chance for me to grow and to expand a little bit. And it definitely has. And that was a lot of what I worked on with my business coach as well, was pushing through that hurdle of not loving being on the phone and not loving cold contacting people, to sort of just viewing it more as the opportunity to help them, which has made that a little bit easier.
So kind of going into the health insurance piece of this, you become an agent.
Right.
So you mentioned cold calling. So you're doing some cold calling. Do you also buy leads or provided leads?
Yes. Okay. So the agency that I'm with, they provide some leads, but like with anything, leads are what you make of them. And there's a ton of lead generators out there. And so that's another thing, sort of like a business coach, where you really have to do your research and make sure that the lead generators that you're using are worth it. Because they'll promise all these things oh, we'll get you X amount of business per month. And it sounds like a huge number. And then when you get more into the field, you're oh, that's basically one sale. So their ROI is pretty limited for some of them. And So yeah, I do purchase some of my own leads, and I also do a lot of networking and a lot of like home shows, vendor events, because I think just in general, warm leads are better, and
Yes.
the research shows that as well. So I don't thankfully have to do a lot of cold calling, but every once in a while, when things get a little slow, or when you need to, when I get into a new state with my licenses, that's kind of where you have to start, and so it's a good tool to have in your belt.
So I'm in Ohio. Where are you at?
So I'm in Utah, but I'm also licensed in Ohio and a lot of other states.
Okay. So if anybody needs a quote, they can just email you, right? That'd just be probably the easiest way where you can get back to them at your own convenience.
Yep. And I'm pretty responsive. I have 2 screens up at all times, so I can see his emails come in, and have the application up right there that I can do a quote for you almost immediately.
So take us through the education part. Like I mentioned, I'm licensed, and like I know more than the average Joe, and I'm still like, this makes no sense to me.
Yes.
What are the things there's a lot of self-service out there. Let's start with that. What's the difference between working with you and a self-service? Right.
So technically, anything that you do health insurance wise, because it is federally regulated, there will be an agent attached to it. So even if you do the self-service, there is an agent that's assigned to you. But they just don't do the helping part of it so much as they do just process the application.
Okay.
And so when you go onto like healthcare.gov or healthsherpa.com or any of those other, like you said, self-service websites, you basically just put your information in, and it will populate a list of things. And it doesn't give you a whole lot of other information other than the price and what the deductibles look like, unless you really know what you're looking for as far as benefit amounts. And most people don't. Most people are just looking to see what the deductible is and what the price is. And so what I do rather than that is I look at that obviously as well, but I also do a needs analysis with each individual person to see like, well, what prescriptions are you looking at? What doctors do you need? What hospitals do you need? Are you expecting to have any surgeries in the next little bit? Are you expecting to have a baby in the next little bit? Let's make sure that the plan that we pick actually is going to benefit you rather than just check the box for having insurance. Because a lot of those plans, even though they're like, the price might be right, the deductible and out of pockets are sky high, and they don't actually cover anything until you hit those for a lot of those cases. And so that's where I come in, and I try to find the happy medium between price and benefits so that people are not completely bankrupted if they have something catastrophic happen.
Sure. And I mean, I remember when I was selling life mostly.
Right.
And I remember talking to someone, and they go, health insurance is a scam. I pay for it, but I still have to pay all this out of pocket stuff.
Yep.
Why does it seem like there is so much out of pocket expense, even though you have coverage, compared to being self-pay?
Yeah, so a lot of that is because of the fact that now all of the plans are guaranteed issue for the marketplace, for anything on the public market. And so it's basically a cost balance for them. So they up their prices, they up their deductibles in order to cover the higher risk individuals. And so that's where that comes in. And so what a lot of people don't know is that there's not just a public market, but there's also a private market. So on the public market, you are basically, like I said, paying for everybody that's more high risk. On the public market, on the private market, they have plans that are health qualified or have other different qualifiers attached to them. So the deductible amounts, the premiums can be lower because they're essentially saying that you're a lower risk. And so where those are an option where people are maybe not getting as much of a subsidy discount on the marketplace, or where they're sick of paying for a high deductible that they never use anyway, the private market plans can be a great option if they're generally healthy to look into something like that rather than, like you said, paying out the nose for something they never even use. And
are there any specific health conditions that would separate someone between high risk and low risk that we could use as a general statement?
Yes. So higher risk are people that use tobacco, have high blood pressure. Diabetes is a big one. There are specific diabetes plans out there. So to help with the cost of insulin as well as any devices that they use. So those are like the 3 big ones that I see more often than not. And so those, because they have so many other conditions that can be attached to them, because they just open up for that. And so that's those higher risk things right there are what already drives up costs on the public market, not to mention any other like cancers or chronic illnesses or autoimmune diseases that are thrown into that mix as well.
How does somebody know if they're going with a good carrier or not?
That is a tough question. And it really sort of depends on where they are. So for example, in Utah, we have a few different carriers. One that's the biggest prominent one out here is Select Health. And so that's one that I tend to go for when I help people on the public marketplace here more often than not, because I know that in general, most of the providers in this area take Select Health.
Okay.
The problem with it is that because they know that, they have a ton of different plans and they have a lot of different deductible and out-of-pocket options that just kind of make it even more difficult to understand. And so while they might have some really good benefits on one plan, a plan that looks almost identical may have completely different benefits.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why it's nice to have an agent to be able to go through those with you to make sure that you're getting a good plan. Because yes, Select Health, like I said, here is accepted almost anywhere, but not every plan is created equal.
Right.
And so it is very difficult to know that because it is so individual. And that's why I recommend people, like I said, use an agent, because they can look at your specific needs and match the plans to you based on that, rather than just, like I said, ticking that box and saying, I have insurance.
Yeah. Let me ask you too, as far as using an agent, there's a lot of insurance companies now that are bundling the health with everything else. Mm-hmm. What would be the benefit of working with somebody like you who's more specialized? So a lot of the time, those ones that are bundled with like everything else, like a payroll company or like some of the APD type companies, yes, they can bundle health, but they have a very limited amount of carriers that they can use. So they're usually they're usually companies that only have one or two carriers that they have access to. And so if you choose to go through one of those, your plans are extremely limited. Okay. And you're kind of stuck with what insurance companies are willing to work with that bundle. And so they tend to be smaller companies sometimes, or companies that have a few more restrictions. And so they can be a little bit more difficult to work with. Sometimes they work beautifully. That's not, a hard and fast rule that they're going to be difficult. Sure. But a lot of the time they're a little bit less established, or they're established in a very specific way that can make them more difficult to work with in the long run. So there's people out there that are like you and me who are introverts, where we don't want to talk to anybody if we can help it. What do you say to those people who would, even knowing that, hey, an agent can help me and can give me more, more insight to what I'm looking at, what would you say to one of those people that would convince them to call someone like yourself? Yeah, that's a really good question. Because like you said, we're both kind of like that. And I try to make it as easy as possible to contact me without calling me. So that number that you just put up is a textable number. My email is readily available, and I'm happy to communicate that way. At a certain point, we will have to have a phone call, because there are certain different, pieces of information that we don't want to send over the internet or over a text. But up until that point where you're just trying to get the information, I've worked a lot with the jargon and things that I know to try to make my texts and emails as concise as possible, so that you can get as much information as you maybe need to sort of make a decision if you want to continue working with me. And then we can sort of build that rapport to start out with over a text or email, and hopefully have a little bit more comfort going into a phone call or a Zoom meeting. I've done a lot of those as well. So it's a little bit lower risk as far as a phone call goes. Now, when somebody shares their information with you, do they have to be worried about being marketed by any other companies or any other agents? No, I'm a private agent, so the information goes directly to me, and that's where it stays. Now, Perfect. If you put your information in on Google and to just a form, I can't promise that. Right. So I get leads that way. Sometimes people put in a form and it goes out, like you said, to maybe 100 different agents, and you might get bombarded. So I really do recommend looking specifically for an agent rather than just putting your information into a form and crossing your fingers, because you will get hounded. And, sure.
People all the time when I call those leads, oh, you're the 17th person that's called me today. And, I usually laugh with them and let them know you can go to donotcall.gov and put your number in, and that should help with the calls. But yeah, I market myself a lot on Facebook and social media so that people can find me directly rather than having to go through the hazard of putting your information out on the internet.
So any introverts out there, if you're thinking about getting health coverage, you might just be better off to just reach out to Kristen directly.
Yes.
Instead of going through some weird self-service portal where you don't even know what you're looking at. Just bite the bullet and start with the conversation, whether it be email or text.
Yep.
You're probably better off just to do it that way.
Yes. And even if it's not me, like you can find health insurance agents on just about any like small business group on Facebook pretty easily. That's the other thing. Don't post asking for one because you will get 100 more agents telling, me. Just use the search function in those groups to look for health insurance agents and you'll find them. And then you don't have to worry about getting harassed.
So take me through the sales process of health insurance. I sold life insurance for some time. And when I think of a sales call, it's not the way an insurance call goes.
Right.
It's a much different quote unquote sale than people expect. I think people are expecting more of a used car salesman approach or something overly aggressive, and it tends to be the opposite of that. Can you share with us kind of how that process would go if somebody reaches out to you?
Yeah, at least you hope it's the opposite of that, right?
Right.
There's definitely some agents that I've seen that, like I said, I'm an independent agent, but I work in an office with a lot of others. And I've seen some that are a little more aggressive and they don't tend to last very long.
Sure.
Because this is a business of helping people. And yes, we want to make sales, we want the commission, but it's built on relationships, right? Like these people are people that I'm going to be working with potentially for 10 plus years. This isn't just a used car. This is their life. This is their health. Right. This is their family. And so I try to keep that in mind when I have those sales calls where, I know that they need this. I know they need insurance. And a lot of the time when they're reaching out to look for insurance, it's for something specific. And so I try to figure that out, try to find out what's motivating them to look for insurance right now. What has been their experience in the past and how can I make that better? Because a lot of the time they've had those terrible experiences where, like, I had a guy that was in Missouri who just kind of got foisted on with some insurance policy that he was like, I don't even know what it was. The guy just signed me up for it and I just didn't feel comfortable with it. And, I ended up signing him up for a different policy that was actually slightly more than what he was paying for, but he liked the sound of it better. It had better benefits than what he had, a lower deductible, and took care of him better. And, because of that, it wasn't that much more expensive, but I had peace of mind about the fact that he was paying a little bit more because I knew that was something that was going to benefit him in the long run.
Yeah.
And so I try to keep that in mind, that this is somebody's life, not just a sale for me.
So if somebody's already got coverage, they can still be a potential client. Could they send you like a declarations page and you could do kind of a side-by-side analysis for them?
Yeah, I actually just did that with, so one of my biggest networking groups is veterans. So I'm in the Army Reserve. And so I do a lot with veterans.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you for your support. And so I do a lot with veterans because as they're transferring out of the military and losing that TRICARE that's really, really affordable, it's very difficult to navigate that new field of insurance. And so I actually just had a gentleman that is getting out of the Air Force and was looking for insurance for his family. And he was like, well, I'm losing TRICARE. I have this benefits page for my company. What do I do? And so he sent me the whole benefits package, and it was very confusing, even for me looking at the way that they had laid it out. And so I basically took all the pieces and put them into like a spreadsheet for him to say, this is what you're looking at. These are the options you have. And then there's these other options here that are outside of your company that we could also look at. And so because he did that for me, he actually wanted to choose one of these other plans that was outside of his company because it made more sense and the coverage was better. But he wouldn't have known that if he hadn't have reached out. And if I hadn't have taken the time to find out what his family's needs were and see if it was worth it for him to say no to his company. And so, yeah, if people already have coverage, that's something I do a lot where, and there have been times where I've said, oh, you know what, this is the best place for you to stay right now based on your income or based on your situation. That's great. Let's talk in a year or let's talk in a couple months. right? And so at worst, I just say stay where you're at. At best, I can find you something better.
How often should someone reevaluate their policy and their carrier?
I would say probably like at least twice a year, because I think everybody sort of waits until November for open enrollment, because I think that's the only time they can do it, and that's just not the case. You can look into it at any point. There are certain qualifiers like special enrollment periods and things like that, but that's not a hard and fast rule either. There are workarounds if you're having a really terrible experience with where you're at. And so I would say look at it about twice a year. Look at it maybe in June and say, is this when I need to start looking? Am I happy with this? And not just looking at it when something terrible happens or when everybody else is doing it in November, because it's hard to get a hold of an agent in November.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of moving on to the family piece of all this. I know when a lot of small business owners, they decide to go into business for themselves, they think this is great. I'm gonna have all this flexibility. I can do whatever I want. Me, I found at the beginning, I had a lot less.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk through your journey of becoming self-employed and how you juggle it all between you have one child or two
Just
children?
Just one. Yes.
How do you juggle it all?
Yeah, it is hard. And like you said, it takes a lot of work, especially at the beginning. So my son is almost 10 months old. So we're still kind of in the thick of it. And like I said, I always knew I was going to be a working parent. I knew I was not cut out to be a stay-at-home mom. And like my mom was a stay-at-home mom and she did amazing at it. And I knew that was not something that I was going to be able to do. And so I have a lot of respect for anybody that's a stay-at-home mom, because it is a lot.
Yeah, it's a special job.
It really is. So I thankfully my dad has done a lot of like entrepreneurial stuff. So I knew that there was a lot of backlog work that was going to go into it.
Right.
The difference was that being a contractor and kind of being in charge of my own schedule is that I don't just have to work a strict 9 to 5. There aren't just strict business hours. So where I'm on Mountain Time, I can get up a little bit earlier to work on Eastern Time or stay up a little bit later to work on Pacific Time. So there's a lot of give and take there. And it's really nice too, because the daycare that my son is at, when he's sick or when something goes wrong, or even if I'm just missing him, I can take some time out of my day and I can go get him. I can take him to the pediatrician. I can do what I need to do. I can work from home and do the things I need to from home and still be a mom and still make sure that he's taken care of. Where if I was at a traditional job, I'd have to worry about PTO. I'd have to worry about attendance and making up hours. And that was just not something that I wanted to do anymore. And I wanted to be able to have that flexibility to be with my son and then to, rule myself and say, okay, we have to stay up a little bit later to get this work done now. But to be able to have that option was so important to me.
Is there been a lot of give and take between you and your spouse with you starting your business?
So I wouldn't say too much. My husband and I have a pretty unique relationship, I think. And we both just kind of view each other as like we're equal partners, but also like independent individuals. And so, I did talk to him about the decision, but it was more of I would like to do this. Do you have any reason why I shouldn't? And he said, nope, go ahead. And so it's mostly just been, check-ins like, hey, are you still liking this? Is this still what you want to do? And what can I do to support you and assist you? And so it's really been a very smooth transition in that regard. And I'm so grateful to him for that, for like the patience that he has and the willingness that he has to just go with my crazy ideas sometimes and, deal with the schedule that I keep and just trust that I'm doing it for the best of the family. And I have that same trust for him that whatever he's doing is for the best of our family. And I think that's really made our relationship so much stronger. And especially just in this last year with the baby being added, I know that can be a strain for a lot of people. And I think for us, it's just brought us closer together and made our relationship even stronger because we've just leaned on each other even more for that support over this year.
What do you think has been the most rewarding part of going down this road of entrepreneur? See, once again, it wouldn't be an authentic episode, not me stumbling over my words. What's the most rewarding part of it?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's that I get to help people so much. I get to do something that I know is going to benefit somebody. So I know that for me, my integrity is such a big part of who I am that I know that if I'm doing something for somebody that's going to help them in the long run, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Whether or not it ends in a commission for me, if I know that I have helped somebody get into a better situation or determine that the situation that they're in is the best for them right now, that is plenty rewarding for me, and keeps me motivated and keeps me moving forward to help the next person.
So if you guys are in need of a good health insurance agent, or you want somebody to come look at your declaration page, well, maybe she can't come to you, but you can send it to her.
Yes.
I'm kind of sold on you, and I hope everybody else is too, because I can tell. I talk to a lot of salespeople, a lot of service people. This is going to sound bad, so anybody listening to this, I'm probably not talking about you if you listen to me consistently, but you can tell when somebody's greasy or dishonest. You just get that feeling, and with you, it's so genuine.
Thank you.
I would feel absolutely comfortable with you helping a friend or family member of mine.
Great.
So
I'm glad.
Man, it's so nice to meet somebody that's doing it for the right reasons besides income.
Right.
Kind of with my last question here, there's a lot of ads out there for insurance people who are looking into becoming insurance agents. And
yes,
I remember when I became one, somebody was like, they automatically think you're rich.
Yeah.
You don't have to share your income, obviously, but what's a realistic expectation of what you could make your first year?
Yeah, and it sort of depends on what route you choose to go, right? So we talked a little bit when we had our phone call about this, about captive versus free agent. So there's a few different options and ways that you can go down. But I think reasonably your first year, you can probably be looking between 50 and 70,000. And that's before tax, obviously. Because that's, especially if you're with an agency and you're getting commission, that's a pretty reasonable expectation. Obviously there are people that way overshoot that, which is incredible. I would say I'm a little bit more on the average side.
That's okay.
Yeah. And because of being a parent and the other obligations that I have, I don't necessarily have as much time to put in as maybe like a 21-year-old single guy that can just do this whenever he feels like it, So, but I would say about 50 to 70, and that's about market standard. And then as you progress and your book of business grows and you start getting more residual income, I have people that are here that could not sell another thing a day in their life and still bring home $10,000 to $20,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
Just on their residuals alone.
That's awesome.
So it can be pretty lucrative if you can stick with it.
Well, and I can say this too, like you mentioned, not having the same time or energy as a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
The way you sell insurance is different when you're a parent, because I did it before I had kids and I've done it after I had kids. And I would recommend somebody to not necessarily do business with somebody who's that young. Not that there's anything wrong with it or that they'll be in it for the wrong idea, but it means a lot to have an agent that's coming from the same place you are.
Right.
But, it just makes a difference. So
it definitely does. And I think, like I said, I would want someone to take care of my family the way that I'm trying to take care of theirs.
Exactly. Well, Kristen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I just think this was a great episode. I think you're a fantastic guest. Thanks. I would love to have you back, like from time to time, and like check in with you, see how you're doing, hear about a $20,000 residual check or something that'd
be great. Let's manifest that.
It's coming 2024. It could happen.
Yes.
You never know.
Yes.
But we did learn a lot, like by talking to you. It's people so much nowadays, they start on one end of the spectrum and they think, okay, this is what I went to school for. This is what I invested in. I have to do it. I can't change. Right. You're a great example of you can change. You can do anything you want. And then also, you helped us learn a ton about insurance today. And I didn't retain very much of it, but what I can tell you is I'm sold on making sure I have a relationship with an agent.
Good.
And then, finally, that last point is you can juggle just about anything with the right support. You mentioned your husband several times, so shout out to him. Thank you.
He'd be mortified to know that I mentioned him, but that's fine.
Well, maybe we could play this for him and see how he feels about it, but no problem. But thank you again. Hang out 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay.
All right.
Well, there you guys have it. Another great episode. If you like content like this, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. If you're not going to do any of those things, at least give me a 5-star review. If you're not going to do that, at least go find Kristen, contact her for a quote, give her a call, whatever it is. She's here to help you guys. And I really meant what I said. If it was my family, I would feel very comfortable working with her. I'll see you guys again next Monday for another episode. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Stay positive.
Sky, the service guy, staying up late at night, doing podcasts all the time, talking about service, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got the sales, we got the knowledge to make a mill, we just paying bills.